Everyone, happy December 31st, 2018. You might not see this till later, but I have to say this is the end of one heck of a year, and we're going to close it out with one of my favorite people in the whole universe, Lisa Haneberg. Lisa's the author of 2 Weeks to a Breakthrough, about small changes and having big impact. You can change your life in, get this, 2 weeks. Hence the title, 2 Weeks to a Breakthrough. Now, I've read all of Lisa's stuff. It is fantastic. This edition of 2 Weeks to a Breakthrough is my favorite because it's got a butterfly on the cover. All about the butterfly effect, which we're going to talk about today as well. But Lisa is now a fiction author, but has this great book that's going to help us propel forward in just 2 weeks to make 2019 our best year ever. So welcome, Lisa. It's so good to see you again.
Likewise, Phil. I think it's been about a year and a half or so since we've talked.
I think so. I think so. Yeah, we play a lot on Facebook, and we used to play a lot more on Twitter and on blogs, but a lot of that has moved to Facebook, which is kind of interesting to me, huh?
Yeah. We were blogging back in the 2004, 2005, before it was cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Before everybody started a blog, right?
Right.
That's so funny. So I say used to be, right? Because used to do this management craft, which was really one of my favorite management blogs of all. And out of that came these little habits and these little things that, you had focus like a laser beam, and then 2 weeks to a breakthrough, which are certainly managers can take and use, but really I think more focused towards the manager and the human as an individual. And I think that's an important distinction, right? This is not about propelling your team. This is about propelling you as a person, which then could power your team. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And in particular, when we talk about the 2 weeks to breakthrough, how I came to that is that I observed successful, passionate people who were getting things done. And then I also observed people who were passionate but not getting things done. And what was interesting is that the difference between those two were very often small things. And so although I've been in management and leadership training and had a psych degree, really in my heart of hearts, I'm a little bit of a science geek. And so, and I was always really fascinated with systems theory. And so I don't know if you know this, Phil, but the father of systems theory, his name is Ludwig Bertalanffy. I know, I'm dropping some names on you here. This is a long time ago, but he came to systems theory because and he was a biologist, and he observed the human body. And there's actually an essay out there called The Problem of Proof of Life. That's a weird title, right? And what he observed is that when you were looking at the human body, that if you just looked at a part of it, you couldn't tell whether it was healthy, right? So if you just had someone's arm, you wouldn't know if they were dead or alive necessarily, or how healthy they were. And so it's this idea that a human body is this interconnected system. And so that actually led him to eventually really look at systems theory, and he was the one that started that. And so we think about weather, we think about human bodies, they're all interconnected. It's not linear, it's very non-linear. And so what that means, though, here's how we get to the tiny things, is that if you and I know, if we had 3 glasses of wine tonight to celebrate New Year's Eve, we might feel a particular way. But if we also didn't eat, if we add that detail, it might be a different outcome. But if we space them by 3 hours, it might be a different outcome. And if we were anxious because we had a fight with the taxi driver, it might be a different outcome. Like every little thing makes the outcome different. And Bertalanffy observed that in the human body, and then he went on to develop it in terms of other systems. And we know with our weather people, they all say, here's what we think is going to happen, but one little shift of the winds, a little shift of this or that makes a big difference. And here's why that matters for us and for breakthroughs. Human systems are chaotic, just like the weather. just like human bodies, right? And so every little thing happens. So, if I'd had an argument with my husband just before coming online here with you, I might come across short and uninterested and all that kind of stuff, right? And therefore, people would have thought and said, oh, she doesn't even believe her own stuff. I'm not going to believe her stuff. I'm not going to apply it. Conversely, if I just had a great little pre-conversation with you 5 minutes ago, I would come on and I'm chipper and I'm ready to go. And someone might go, whoa, I might give that a try and it could change their life. That like one little difference. And so here's the question that I like to pose to people in the beginning of the year is as good a time as any, if not better, is, well, what if we could harness that? And that's what 2 weeks to a breakthrough is all about, is taking an approach of being deliberate about this chaotic systems theory idea, and that little things reverberate, make a big difference, kind of like a butterfly flap. The whole thing about chaos theory, and one little flap from a butterfly changes the weather on the other side of the earth. That's what happens for us. So this conversation today is going to catalyze something. I don't even know what it is yet, right? Who knows? And we may never know. It might catalyze something really interesting for you. It might catalyze something really interesting for me. It might catalyze something for Sally, who's in Paducah, who's listening to this right now. I don't know. Yeah. But isn't that a cool concept?
Well, not only is it a cool concept, right? It's a cool truth. Like, this actually exists. This really does happen. This is not just some theory that's brought out of thing that, as you mentioned, I mean, the little things, if we take them and we just pluck them out one at a time, they're meaningless. Like, okay, that happened. But if we put them together, we see a chain reaction. And if we're intentional about that and we flap on purpose and we have a clear vision for that, I think we're going to stand to gain a lot more, to move forward a lot more than if we just said, oh yeah, I'm just going to random stuff happen to me this year.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think the power too is if you're looking for a way to justify in your mind that being deliberate about putting small actions into place that are directionally correct, which is what you're talking about, having some sort of a directionality to it. Even though with chaotic systems, you can't be precise. You don't know if this conversation will lead to that outcome. But what you can know is if you talk to lots of folks who are interested in what you're interested in or who care about you, that's going to propel the conversation in the right direction. And some magical things, some of which, by the way, are going to be better than you can even fathom, right? So to me, the magic is in not only deliberately putting the power of chaos theory and the butterfly effect to use, but to also be open to the fact that we don't know what's possible. And so while we want to be moving in the direction of whatever it is, building a business, becoming a better writer, building a stronger family life, whatever it is, being a better spouse, whatever you want to do, improving your health, you might have some broad notion of where you want to go. But what you should know is that even more is possible, or even better is possible, or different in a way that you can't conceive is possible. And so that's why I caution to some degree people having overly specific New Year's resolutions, is because you're narrowing your possibilities when you say, I want to lose 12 pounds in the month of January, right? Okay, well, technically you could lose 20, or you could lose 5, but in a way that improves your health so much more, or you could do something completely different that's better for your health. So New Year's resolutions by themselves, one of the reasons why I think people give up on them, why they lose some energy for them, is because they tend to be prescriptive to a point that they're not magical. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's so interesting, because some of the people that I've read certainly believe in, and I in the past have believed in the whole SMART goal setting, right? Like, let's set some measurable, time, actionable, results-oriented goals. And often to that point, 90 days in, 30 days in, sometimes 2 days in, it's like, okay, well, I've been blown off course, so that sucks. That's over. All right, I'm just going to give up now. Or it's time to completely reset and say, let's see. Yep, okay. Well, I said weight loss, but no, what I really meant was, and then I spend my time chasing my tail instead of heading in the right direction. And so that makes a lot of sense. So what do you think about these folks? Chris Brogan's got 3 words. I've seen a lot of people this year talk about setting 1 word for an intention. What do you think about those things, Lisa? Are those helpful, not helpful in a 2 weeks to a breakthrough mindset?
So if it serves as a positive filter, then I am all for it. And here's what I mean by that. So for example, for me in 2019, I do have sort of 3 broad strategies that I'm looking at. And I do have 1 word that I've attached to each of them. Thrive, create, and nest. And those are my 3 words, right? And so thrive is all about health and healing for me, right? So if I think about that word throughout the day a few different times, and if doing so helps filter my actions such that I'm butterfly flapping in a way that's directionally correct, then I'm all for that, because that's going to put things into play that are going to reverberate in a positive way. And so I think if you've got, I do believe that the broader you are, the less prescriptive you should be, because it's impossible to describe with great specificity something really, really broad. But I think you can be very specific about what you're going to do today. Right? So the whole thing about SMART goals and all that stuff, I think if it's really close in, it's helpful to have time-bound things. It's helpful to be specific. It's helpful, all that kind of stuff. It's when you apply that to something that's too broad, and that what that does is that narrows you, and it does make for stress and conflict when things aren't quite what they're going to be, which is always, right? Things are always not quite what they're going to be. Right?
Well, yeah, as a recovering perfectionist, right, that's absolutely true, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things almost never go the exact way that I expected them to go. I can tell you 8 years ago, now almost 9 years ago, when I started my business, I thought I was going to be management consulting. I had a Slacker manager blog, and I have to tell you, if I stayed rigid to that, I would have quit about 6 months in, probably less, because my biggest client left and nobody was hiring me for management stuff, but they were hiring me for, can you help me with LinkedIn? Can you help me with sales? Can you help me with this? Can you help me put that technology piece into place to make my business more efficient, more effective? And so it's interesting how the direction that I wanted to go was really just out on my own and figure that out and have more freedom, as opposed to this is exactly the business that I must have. And if not, I am a complete failure, which, prior, even 10 years ago, that would have absolutely happened to me. I was a freak. I mean, that would have stressed me out beyond belief. So it's fun I found it freeing. I mean, cause I don't, when did you first write the book, Lisa? Cause I think this book is part of what gave me the flexibility to have that, if memory serves, between this and the breakthrough book, when the laser beam book, I'm pretty sure that came out about the time that I was leaving my job in 2000.
Yeah, they were both around 2008.
8 and 9, right?
Yeah.
So that was right when I was kind of opening up my brain to the possibility even of leaving corporate America.
Yeah, and I remember, and just to let me make an observation based on what you just said that might even help people understand this a little bit. So what you were talking about in terms of the initial path that you thought you were going down that had a little bit more definition, that had you not been willing to figure out what was really there, you would have been stuck. But I think there's another outcome that I've observed in knowing you over 10 years is that I don't know that you saw coming either as being a part of your commercial brand. And that's sort of the energy and connection. So you have become famous and regarded and admired for authenticity in relationships and the power of using that, not in a manipulative way, but in using it in terms of a strength to build business, to build relationships that are authentic and serve people. And so what's interesting is that strength, that tool's not the right word, but you know what I mean? That product, that service. I don't think you planned that was part of your brand either, but it actually, the more comfortable you got with being who you really are, which is this warm, connecting, fascinating, loving person, and realizing that that's actually the superpower in building anything, right?
Yep.
And so like that's the mojo, but you could not have conceived of that. And it was only through all those little interactions that you had, through all the blogging and all the informal relationships, the ones you have, virtual relationships that last for years. And it's only that because you were open to that, did it happen. And so I think for people too, is have to see the possibility that something magical could happen that you don't even know, that you can't even articulate. And my husband still, he knows who you are. And for 10 years, he's kind of known who you were, but he always describes you as sort of the happy guy. Right. And what's interesting is for him, that's his way of sort of saying, I acknowledge it's the energy and the smile that comes through. Right. And I don't know if that rings true for you or if that makes sense in terms of an observation.
Yeah, well, it totally does. I mean, the power of intentional connection is absolutely true. And so I view sales and marketing and technology really as a service that we provide to others, not a service in the traditional corporate sense, but a service to others. I mean, technology and sales and marketing for their own sake, to me, is no fun. I don't enjoy that at all, but I love the fact that it can help connect people. It can help connect the ideas and can help catalyze a lot of things for people and be a massive accelerant. I mean, the whole power of blogging took what was once such a cottage industry, right? You go off in the woods and you go write. I mean, Stephen King's on writing. I have to tell you, I could not read a book that's more wrong about how I write. It's so fascinating to me because when I was with 800CO Read, they all want, we read this book when we're doing author stuff with them. Read this book and this is how you should write, as one option. It's not like they said this the only way, but I read the book. I'm like, man, that is so not me. Like, that's not it. But because of blogging, now this possibility opens up. And the fact of the matter is, I'm sure I've met 10,000 people, 100,000 people, because I was willing to take that little step and put up a blog and put up my space in the world, and then grow from there into other platforms as well. But really, that was a micro step. I mean, writing one article could be the propellant for somebody to flap in a new direction and helps.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm here talking to you today, I can actually trace back to when I lived in Seattle, and I was working on, my first book had just come out, High Impact Middle Management. And it was the time when Fast Company was just getting started, and they had Fast Company of Friends stuff.
Yeah.
And they had an event, and I thought I would go to one. And so I went to this Fast Company of Friends event, in a restaurant that's right next to the Starbucks headquarters. And that's where I met people who were blogging. That was just one of the conversations that was there. But I remember that night thinking, oh no, I don't know what they're talking about. And I'm irrelevant. And that night, I went on, got a TypePad account, and started Management Craft that night. I know.
Wow.
So, but that was because I went to the Fast Company event, and I was listening. And so sometimes the butterfly flap that you're flapping is fear, because you go to this thing and you see all these people talking. They were talking track backs and all this. I'm like, I don't know what that is. I'm like, oh my goodness. And, I guess I'm close to 40 at the time, and I'm thinking, I'm over the hill. I don't know what's going on. And so that's when I started Management Craft. And then I learned about connecting to other bloggers and all this kind of stuff. And that's when you and I started, sharing each other's posts and tracking backing and all that other kind of stuff, right? And then my mother died in 2007, and I decided I'm going to do this motorcycle ride. And that's when I went around the country, and that's when we met in person for the first time. And that was, in 2007 or 8. And you were still working at that time. You were considered, that was just before you went freelance.
That,
right?
Well, so that's actually, that was 2007. That's right before my ex-wife told me she was going to divorce me. That's how I know when it was. That was
Right,
August of 07. Yeah. Yep. So that was on the bicycle tour. And I remember, because we were talking about, I was going to leave that October or November, and then it didn't happen. And then like February came and the boom got lowered. And then that October I gave a 2-year notice.
Right.
But that tour was absolutely a catalyst for me, recognizing that this is an opportunity to go do something different. For sure.
Yeah.
And and having dinner with you. Absolutely. That was a game changer for sure.
So, although we took the last 10 minutes or so to sort of talk about our past, what it really shows though is there's a lot of different ways that you can make things happen very quickly for yourself. And so, for example, just in terms of just some practicalities, if we look at what's in here and what I tried to bring to bear, because I saw that this kind of stuff happens, right? And so the book itself helps provide some ideas, some stimulus, some avenues for what type of butterfly flaps should you consider. And again, not prescriptive, but more around, if you're looking to grow in this way, you might try these types of things. Or maybe one of the things you need to do is look through other people's eyes and have a different point of view about it. Or maybe one of the things that you need to do is to look at it from the opposite perspective. Or maybe one of the things you need to do is you need to tell more people about what you're up to so that they can be helpful to you, right? And so the power of sharing your intentions, etc. And so all of these things, people reflect on their lives and they think about where they are today and how they got there. Very, invariably, they're going to be able to recognize that there was these little things that made a big difference. And so if that's true, then I'm going to do more little things. That's all I can say. And I'm going to make sure they're directionally correct. And I'm going to make sure that I'm putting the power of these reverberations to work for me. So it's about understanding what naturally happens, but saying, I'm not just going to leave it to fate or chance or whatever. I'm actually going to design my future. And that's why I think it's a perfect time that we're talking now as people are thinking about 2019. I think it's a perfect time anytime, but it's even doubly so when people are agonizing over, should I have a resolution? Should I not have a resolution, etc. And I think just start flapping in a way that's going to be beneficial to you. And if you need a little bit of inspiration, watch this video a few times. It might give you a few ideas, right? And so I've seen amazing things happen with little teeny tiny actions. And it's powerful and it's normal and it's natural and it's what we should do, and it's better than spending hours and hours trying to do something that's not going to work half as well, right?
Absolutely. And something that isn't going to give you as much energy.
Right.
Because
right.
this actually does provide a lot of lift underneath you. It does make you feel better, because if you're rigid, and speaking from someone recovering perfectionist here, right, it is often damning to yourself. Like, come on, dude, go in the right direction. This isn't working, as opposed to setting an intention to go, a certain way, and then being open to the little things that can make that so much better. So let's let's bring this in. Let's make it a little bit more practical, Lisa, because I think, we talked a lot about kind of the bigger picture, but let's narrow this in here with like what would be an intention that people could set, and then let's talk from there about how we can actually do that.
Sure. So, well, one of the common ones is, a lot of people, whether it be as a part-time or a full-time thing, they're trying to build their own individual practices, right? And so whether they're an artist or a writer or a consultant, they're wanting to build their own businesses, right? Or sidelines, or even just get a book published as they keep their day jobs. But they've got something that they want to get into the world, and they want it to affect the world, right? So there's that. I think we often tend to be really conservative when it comes to what we should do and when we should do it. One of the exercises that's in the book, and what you'll see, it's structured as 2 weeks, and it simply means that every day you kind of look through a different lens. You try different things that might get you unstuck. And one of the ones that is really, really fun, and so let's encourage people to do this tonight as they're drinking their champagne, because it might actually help, is this idea of thinking of wild ideas. And so we tend to be pretty conservative, but if you did not have any kind of a filter on, if you said no holds barred, if you said, what's the craziest, wackiest way that I could do this? And if you brainstormed all those, and if you asked 5 of your friends who have also had 2 glasses of champagne, what's the craziest idea that you think might actually work to help me get my book published or get my business done or whatever? And what's interesting is out of all of those crazy ideas, there might be something that you actually pull into. So I got to tell you, taking my motorcycle 9,400 miles around the United States on my own in 40 different states was not a conservative idea, and it was a crazy one. And you want to know how crazy it was? The day I left Seattle to go down to Portland, that was my first ride. The longest I'd ever driven on a motorcycle was 40 miles, 40. I know, how stupid, right?
Holy cow, Lisa.
I'd never even been on a day trip. And I set out to go 9,400 miles. That was a wild idea that I brought to fruition, right? Now, looking at it in 2020 vision, it wasn't that wild. And I stayed in hotels. And I had a phone, all this, but when you think about it, can you imagine if I'd put a filter on myself when that idea came up? I would have never done it. Never done it. Right. And so that's just one way. So that's one thing. Here's one more that I would say that is one that I practice a lot and I advocate others do as well. And that's making unreasonable requests. So let's define unreasonable. Unreasonable is not mean or selfish. So I don't mean where, a spouse might go to might talk to their husband or wife and say, I'm no longer going to support the family like I'm supporting the family. I'm no longer going to pay any bills, and I really don't want anything to do with the kids. That's like a mean, selfish, bad thing to ask, right? So when I say unreasonable requests, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about requests that to you feel a little bigger than you're comfortable. And so it might feel like an unreasonable request. So for example, if you were to ask that same spouse, I really want to publish a book in 2019. And I'd like to be able to have the first 3 hours of the morning from 5 until 8, just on my own time. And to do that, can we make that work? How can we make that work? What could we make work? That might feel like an unreasonable request, but it's not mean or malicious. And, and even if it ends up being negotiated where it's something slightly different, it feels hard. It feels heavy. It feels scary. But one of the things I recommend in the book, and one of the things that I've done myself, is take every Sunday and make 5 unreasonable requests, big requests. Like it might be for someone who is trying to build their consulting business or has a podcast, is who's their dream guest. And at the time I was podcasting I had podcasted for about 6 years. And I had Marcus Buckingham and John Cotter, like amazing people that I admired. And it's only because I had the courage to make a bigger request, which, by the way, to them, it wasn't a bigger request, right? And they both of them had books coming out. So, of course, they said yes. So I learned the thing that if you want someone to talk to you, you just pick when they've got a book coming out. And they'll talk to basically anybody, which is great. But at the time, it felt scary to me. It felt like an unreasonable request. And so I encourage people to make beneficial, in other words, it's not going to hurt anyone. Someone might need to give up a little, like if you're negotiating with a spouse or a partner, but it's a beneficial, unreasonable request. And so to me, those are two things. Think about the wildest ideas, think about unreasonable requests. And those are ways that you can get yourself out of your own box where you're being too conservative. And what you find is that these butterfly flaps, so even if you send an email to someone, to John Cotter, and say, hey, would you be on my podcast? John Cotter might say no, and he'll say no, but I'll let you talk to my assistant, whoever. And then, of course, your answer will be, awesome. I'd love to talk to your assistant, whoever, and they may be better on your podcast than John Cotter. You just never know what's going to happen, right? So you might as well just try. And so put those things out into the world of possibility. If you don't ask, it'll never happen, right, Phil?
Absolutely. Well, that's how I got Seth Godin and Tom Peters on the show this year.
Those were awesome, by the way. I watched both of them. They were great.
Thanks. Yeah, it was fun. And, and I knew their books were coming out. And for me, yes, I wanted them on my show for me, but I also wanted to help them with their books because it's an honor to be part of a successful book. It really is. And it's really fun. And it's great to get an early copy of a book and read it before most other people do. And I have some questions about it. So it expanded my thinking. It expanded my world. And it's funny because I have people that are like, wow, you got to talk to Seth and Tom. And frankly, yeah, I mean, I'm wow too. Don't be fooled. But I knew that over time it was going to happen. This is not that. If you ask enough people, eventually you kind of get what you want. And I asked Marshall Goldsmith this year, and Marshall said no, but he connected me with Sally Helgeson, who was the co-author of his book. So, which is great. Sally was a phenomenal guest. I love talking to her. So absolutely, that totally works. That totally works, and it's not as hard as it sounds because the worst that happens, I would tell you, is not even no. It's just being ignored.
Right. Yeah.
Which, who cares? Like, get over yourself. Because I've been ignored plenty of times. That's you get used to it, I guess. So, which is cool. So one of the things, though, in the book, Lisa, that you talk about that I really love is the whole idea of a daily practice, which I think is the most powerful piece of the book. I've said that before. When the book first came out, I know that I wrote that at least 100 times to people that asked about the book. But talk to us about the daily practice and how that is set up and then how that works out being so beneficial.
Sure. The daily practice is deceptively simple. And it is very, very simple, but what it does for you is actually pretty profound and magical. But it's basically this. You share what you're up to, your goal, your intention with two people. You take two actions, and they could be tiny actions. They could be read a chapter in a book, write a chapter, or write a paragraph. It could be send 2 emails to get podcast guests, etc. They could be small or larger actions. So 2 actions, and then make 2 requests, right? And here's the idea that when you share what you're up to with folks, people want to be part of what's going on. And talk about reverberation. The number one way that you can make the reverberation start to occur is to communicate and connect with people about what you got going on. right? And so now you can do this in person, you can do this over the phone, you can do this virtually, you can do it in email, but you want to say, hey, this is what I'm interested in. This is a project I got going on. This is what I'm up to. And I'd love to get your thoughts on X, Y, Z, right? Or I want to share with you because I know you know lots of people in this other area. Who should I be talking to? And so you want to share what you're up to, and then you want to take a little bit of action, and then you want to make a couple of requests. And here's why it's both simple but also magical, is that every day, even if you do this just a little bit, and by the way, this doesn't take long at all. The daily practice is just a few minutes every day. But you keep reminding yourself about what you're up to. And it's like you're retuning your own heart and your own head to the right stuff so that you stay mentally engaged, because remember, it's trying to have these beneficial butterfly flaps in action. And so to do that, you actually have to remember what it is you're trying to do. Because I got to tell you, if you're only a weekend warrior, you're going to spend the other days going in the wrong direction or flapping in ways that reverberate that aren't helpful, right? And so the daily practice reminds you what you're up to every day, every day. And what happens is, if you are 3 hours later in a bookstore and you see a book that's has something to do with what you're trying to develop, you're gonna see that and you're gonna go, oh, I should probably take a look at this. Whereas if you weren't even thinking about it, you wouldn't notice the book. And so it's about keeping your own intentions top of mind, and then you're actually sort of communicating and recommitting to it every day. But it's a little bit every day that goes on. And by the way, these reverberations are in place. So conversation you had yesterday, Phil, is reverberating right now. And the conversation you're going to have tomorrow will start reverberating tomorrow. And so we want all this stuff happening while we're working and while we're doing other things. It's like getting into play a whole army of beneficial butterfly flaps for you. And so if you do a little bit every day, it's just going to be so much more powerful. But more than anything, it's simple. Everyone can be successful. And at the end of the day, you go to bed and you know that you're in alignment with your dreams. You're making it happen. And that has an impact too, because when we go to sleep and we don't think, oh, I shoulda, I coulda, I wish I woulda, and then you've got all this mental garbage going on, then you don't sleep and you have nightmares, etc. And there's lots of psychology that goes on in terms of what happens when we sleep, right? But when we actually do a little bit every day, we're going, okay, I'm making progress, I'm making progress, I'm making progress. And there's been lots of studies that have also said one of the most powerful motivators is feeling like you're making progress. And the daily practice guarantees that every day you're going to feel like you're making progress in little tiny ways that then reverberate and make big things happen. So it's like putting a few cents in a bank account and they happen to have 25% interest going on right now, right? Which is awesome, which is not true. I mean, most savings accounts make nothing, but in our world, it's you never know, it might double.
Yeah, well, and it's a compound effect too, which
That's
I
right.
think is really, really powerful, is that it's one flap today equals 1.001 flaps tomorrow, which equals 2.002 flaps the next day,
That's right.
and on and on and on. And a little more unpacking there, the whole repetition locks it into your brain that you do activate your brain to look for patterns, to look for things that fit that,
Right.
to look for people that fit that. And I love the idea of support, because I have to tell you, when you're doing something big, there's going to be enough people that tell you no. You need to find the people that are willing to say yes, and how can I help you?
Right.
So these asks should be direct. You don't have to make them public. You don't have to post them on Facebook. You don't have to tweet about them. You don't have to LinkedIn them, right? You do, though. I encourage folks to be direct about this, because otherwise you get a lot of slacktivism where people will say they support you and they don't. Not that there's anything wrong with a like or a comment or a share, right? Nothing at all wrong with that. But when it's direct, you're asking for something directly instead of getting the whole group think of, oh, well, somebody else will step up, so therefore I
Right.
don't have to, which I think
Yeah.
is really good.
And I think I'd like to encourage people to view this as a win-win, because we love to support and help people. And so, I mean, as humans, it's fun, it's amazing. And so if someone I care about is up to something, or even if someone I just met, and I can connect them to a person that would be good for them to talk to, I'm happy to do that. I get people all the time that are saying, hey, this is the year I really want to get my book out. And so I talk to a lot of people for that. And even if just one phone conversation or one email or one reference saying, they're saying, I've got my book, I'm just trying to figure out whether I should self-publish or go traditional. If I can just send them to one resource that helps them make that decision, or if I can say, hey, you should watch this video or this podcast or go to this conference, and if that makes a difference in their lives, I feel good. So what that means is when you're sharing what you're up to and when you're making requests, you're actually helping people do what they like to do, which is to contribute. Yeah. And so to me, that's a win-win.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great gift that we can give people, is the gift of our support and our encouragement and our love that doesn't cost anything except for a little bit of time. And to your point, it's absolutely a win-win, because most people do like to help. Those that don't, if you're listening, please don't leave a comment, because I really don't care. If you don't like to help, that's okay, right? You just go somewhere else. But for those who do, other people do too. And I forget that too. I am often really bad at asking for help. The daily practice helps that, which is why I'm so excited to talk to you today about your book, Lisa, about 2 weeks to a breakthrough. There's so much here. There's so much that folks can do. We talked about the daily practice, about the sharing, and about the, set bigger goals than you expect. But Lisa, is there one other thing that as we're closing out 2018 that folks can do to start with their breakthrough and start moving towards their big goals?
So the one thing I would say is choose wisely when it comes to what's worth your energy. And so we want to have, how we actually define our goals is pretty important. And so when you speak your goal or when you speak your intention to someone, you want it to make the hairs on the back of your neck go up, because it's like amazing and important, right? And so just know that if you've got something that's, even when you say it to your friends or your family or to yourself, it's kind of want. I'm not sure that's worth your effort. Like all, the heart, the soul, the daily practice, everything. So I think the very first thing I would suggest is let's take this first week of 2019 together and let's do a little dreaming. Like, what do you want your future to look like? What is it that you really want to work toward? What is it that you're passionate about? What is it that uses your strengths? And if you can get to some one thing that when you share it, you sort of feel something when you share it, that's when you know that you've gotten to something. And that's what you should be sharing with 2 people every day. That's what you should be applying actions against. That's what you should be thinking about, the wild ideas. That's what you should be making requests regarding. And so I think that's what I would say is make sure that what you're selecting in terms of your goals or your intentions or your strategies or however you want to word it, is that it's something that's important enough and meaningful enough to you that it's worth the effort. And it's not just what you think you ought to do or what seems logical to do or what others who are in my industry do next, it's really, what is it that is going to fulfill you and help you help others and contribute to this great planet that we're in? Even if it's in a tiny way, even if it's something that maybe won't ever be mentioned outside of your home, that's totally fine. If it makes you more content and more productive, and to have your life be a better life where you're helping others in the process. So to me, it's really getting grounding on what should you be paying attention to. That's what I would say is the first thing. And that's what we should be doing today and tomorrow and the next few days, is saying, you know, what would be awesome? Not just what's my resolution, but what would be awesome? What would be great? What would be magic? What's better than I can even imagine? What could that look like? To me, that's where we should start.
Absolutely. Start with what lights you up, what sets your heart on fire and gets you up every single day. Start there. That's the direction that we want to go in. So if you're listening to this on the end of the year, take some time and think about wherever your goals want to be. Not necessarily where they are today, but where you want them to be. Dream big. Set your goals bigger than you thought. And take the time. Don't rush into this, folks. There's a lot there. The book is 2 weeks to a breakthrough. It's a fantastic book about small changes to get big results. If you want to get more from Lisa, Lisa's website is at lisahaneberg.com. That's HANEBERG.com. Lisa's got 2 weeks to a breakthrough and other links there. Her fiction books are fantastic. She sent me some cool bookmarks there with Ghost Rat and Toxic Octopus and Dead Pelican, which are fantastic as well. But check Lisa out. Start your breakthrough today, folks. Whatever that means, dream big. Don't settle for small. Go big. Thank you, Lisa, so much for being here. You are fantastic, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.